Women. What was your worst encounter with a nice guy? I worked with him. We had an evening shift at a public library where for the last 2 hours, it was just the two of us. It's also quiet. There's no reason for us to be open, honestly. After a few months of working the shift together, we got into a routine of sitting at the 2 information desks and emailing each other links to weird Wikipedia articles. Like a competition to see who could find the weirdest one. It was mostly okay. It was into anime a bit obsessively, which could get a little much, but he pulled his weight at close, which many of my past colleagues in that shift had not done, and was generally pleasant, so, Then one day he brought me a rose and asked me to the Japanese film festival a local cinema was putting on. I said that wouldn't be very appropriate, given that I was married, and he sulked and stomped and spent the rest of the evening muttering about, "You be freaking nice to girls and this is what you get." But he knew I was married. There was a period where my car was caught in a hailstorm and was being repaired that took 2 weeks. During that time, my husband came and picked me up from work. Also, our friendly interactions were limited to work talk and emailing Wikipedia articles about weird deep-water fish or tiny national parks. So I don't know how he got "she's interested" from that. The next few months were just crappy on that shift because he sulked and moped and banged books around and stopped doing anything in clothes, despite it actually being his job. Then he went to Japan to teach English, and now I work the shift with a different guy who doesn't bring me flowers or make things awkward or interpret talk about system upgrades as flirting. Also, he brings Uno cards, so winner, winner. Oh, trust me, those Uno cards are going to destroy your friendship. Story 2. I was friends with him for a few years. He knew I was struggling with my mental health and tried to use it against me. Straight up told me that the only reason I failed those attempts was because he kept me alive through his goodwill and grace. So therefore, I owed him favors. In his eyes, I survived because I was meant to be with him. I didn't know what else to do but ghost him after that. He tried stalking me for a few months, but disappeared when threatened with a restraining order. Hopefully he's gone for good. Guess it was the worst encounter for me because up until then, I thought he was actually a nice guy. I trusted him and saw him as a close friend. Felt kind of hurt and disgusted after that. And stupid. He's stupid. Story 3. A male coworker reported another male coworker to HR for inappropriate behavior towards me. Except there was no inappropriate behavior. He was just jealous of the new boy and how well we got along. When I confronted him and asked why he did that because it could really hurt the other dude standing, he gave a flaky excuse and I was cold to him the rest of the shift. The next day I came in to find he had made me a crown of cardboard and a cardboard sign that said "Castle." Colored them and everything. He presented them to me like it was the best thing he could have done and it fixed everything. Spoiler, it did not fix everything. And now I was angry and weirded out. Story 4. I had a guy friend who was crushing hard on me. I was married at the time, although it was on the rocks, but told him it wasn't happening. Then the divorce process started and he figured he was like Flynn. After the finalization, I did agree to a couple of dates, but realized early on that I wasn't feeling it at all. Partly because, I just got out of a crappy marriage. I told him I wasn't on the same page and hit a hissy, "I can't believe you aren't giving me a real chance after I've waited so long for you, and I would treat you so much better than your ex, but you won't even allow me the opportunity to show you." His perspective seemed to be that because he liked me, I needed to give him a shot, regardless of my own feelings. I held my ground and said we could be friends or we could be former friends. Nothing else. He decided friends were good enough. A while later, he had to have medical testing done and would be in the hospital overnight under observation. He admitted to me he was petrified and asked me to keep him company to help calm his nerves. His family all lived 2 states away, so I agreed to come sit with him. I brought a book and read aloud to him. We watched some TV and chatted. I finally went home around 1 a.m. The next day, he called to tell me that the testing had gone well and that his result was good. I congratulated him and made getting off the phone noises, but he said, "So now are we more than just friends, right?" It would seem that he believed that because I spent the evening with him at the hospital, I must have feelings for him. I explained that what I'd done for him, I would have done for pretty much any of my friends who needed it. I then said that maybe trying to stay friends wasn't such a good idea. He said, "You can't do this to me right after a trauma. I've been through hell. You need to at least try being my girlfriend for a month." I don't remember exactly what the testing was at the hospital, but it involved the nurse coming in every hour or so to check something. I'd leave the room for it to give him privacy. When I'd returned, he didn't appear particularly traumatized. Somehow, our every interaction made him more and more unattractive to me. After a while, I didn't even want to be friends with him anymore. Story 5. Guy in high school stalked me for months after I wouldn't date him. I didn't understand why I didn't like him because he was a nice guy. I had to change my routes, I walked to classes and everything because he would try to stop me at school. He'd also text me all the time and I responded from time to time so he wouldn't get angry because I was scared. Then he threatened to end it all if I ignored him, and that was the last straw for me. I told some of my older friends and they said they would handle it. I never heard from him again. Don't worry, he's alive. I would hope so. Story 6. My brother was a nice guy for years. He'd always be telling me about how nobody likes him because nice guys always finish last and said all the other classic lines. Also acted like it was crazy that girls didn't want to be in a relationship with him even though they were nice to him. I've seen texts between him and multiple girls and all of them played out the same way. The girls would always try to make conversations with him and he'd reply with 1 or 2 words and not be engaging whatsoever. Then try to get to know them at all. They'd ghost him and he didn't get it. He had a lot of long conversations about how he was doing this to himself. He's trying way too hard to find a relationship and expected one from any girl he talked to. Anyways, now he and I laugh at the r/nice guys posts because of ignorant nice guys can be. He's come such a long way. Story 7. I spent my teens and early 20s in an interracial relationship where a particular combination wasn't very common at the time. Shortly relevant. When I was 17 to 19, I worked at a coffee shop in a busy mall a few blocks from the building where I lived. And my favorite place to get lunch or dinner during my breaks was a health food convenience store a few doors down. The cashier at the store was a hipster guy in his late 20s or early 30s who was the same ethnicity as my boyfriend, which I knew because they struck up a conversation about it when my boyfriend joined me for lunch there once. I also want to point out here that the cashier was second generation and thoroughly Americanized, so I don't believe that what follows is indicative of his growing up with different cultural norms. And my boyfriend immigrated to the US during high school and didn't think any of this was normal. The cashier, from there on out, started being exceptionally intense around me. At first, this was stuff like staring and making excessive eye contact during all transactions, trying to predict what I was going to eat based on what my last several purchases had been, and coming out from behind the counter to help me select my lunch, which meant standing in front of the case and very slowly examining containers of food while narrating his explanations of why each container was better or worse, while obstructing my way out of the store. He then would bring me up really slowly while telling me how much he liked my hair or how interesting it was that I wore a skirt with my coffee shop uniform while none of the other women did, and how unique it made me. This came up a number of times. It was basically stuff that made me uneasy but wasn't overly creepy enough for me to give up my lunch spot right away. I had a giant, curly, and naturally colored hair that a lot of people still comment on, even now, that it's a natural color. He also found my MySpace, the early 2000s, and added me, which should have been more alarming at the time since he didn't know my last name. I have a pretty unusual first name, but for him to find me, he probably had to look through 100 profiles. I also used to actively blog on MySpace, and he started sending me these long, rambling messages in response to everything I posted. I guess my denial was as deep as my love for the avocado salad at the shop because I kept going there even though he was a weirdo. One day he told me he had seen me walking with my boyfriend, and he asked me if I like going out with guys of his ethnicity. I told him I like going out with my boyfriend. He asked if I would go out with him, to which I reminded him that we were literally talking about my boyfriend in the previous sentence. Then basically pounded the counter with his fist and said, "Jesus, can't you just freaking hang out with someone who isn't your boyfriend?" Really angrily, which prompted me to decide to start making my own lunch. Then the cashier started coming to my coffee shop every day. Even though the shop where he worked had far superior and free for him coffee, he would just look at me with this bovine, silent-eyed stare the whole time, and if I was cashiering, he would let other people in line go ahead of him until he got to my register rather than let another person ring him up. If I was making drinks, he would make a point to take a huge slurping sip while maintaining eye contact after I handed him his drink. At one point, he asked me why I wasn't coming back to the store anymore while my somewhat sexist manager, who was in the midst of a bitter divorce, was working with me. I said something along the lines of trying to save money, and the cashier told me he would bring me free food, which I refused for several days before he stopped because, as he told me, his manager saw him and he hoped I appreciated the risk he had taken. He also started hanging on the patio and scribbling in his notebook while I was working. One day, he left a piece of paper behind, accidentally. He came back asking for it later, and I denied all knowledge of it, which had a terrible love poem about a crimson-haired siren with a lot of sketches of a girl who looked like me if my coffee shop uniform had been designed by Rob Liefeld, and if I had long legs. I don't. He left behind more poems over the course of a year, none of which I ever acknowledged, so he started messaging them to me on MySpace, which I also didn't acknowledge. Things were then complicated by the fact that my boyfriend and I actually broke up for reasons unrelated to this. Great guy, but his mother didn't approve of me, and I was tired of sneaking around after 6 years together. Cashier dude picked up on this because my boyfriend wasn't around and went into hyperdrive. He'd send me a message on MySpace daily. One time I walked by the shop where he worked with my friends, and he left the counter and ran out to yell after me while his manager yelled at him to come back in. Once, I got a series of angry messages about how he had been playing my favorite band in the store and he had been reprimanded for it, and how it was my fault that I hadn't come by to appreciate it. Hilarious because my favorite band was a dissonant, sweary post-punk group that can be very hard to listen to. It wasn't long after that I moved several hundred miles away for school, which of course I didn't tell the cashier. When he found out I left, he sent me a number of tirades about how cruel I had been not to give him a chance. Then the typical nice guy paradoxes of my being a frigid witch, then that I was a racist for not wanting to date him. And then he said that he was just going to quit his job and move to Brazil to get over this betrayal. I ended up deleting MySpace in favor of Facebook shortly thereafter. But that was 10 years ago. I recently found a message in my other inbox from this guy on Facebook asking if I was who he thought I was. My name on Facebook is my first name plus not my last name. Profile photo is of me and a group of people hiking at some indistinguishable distance. I told him no and he never replied, but couldn't help but look at his profile. Turns out he did indeed move to Brazil. Story 8. I used to be friends with this nice guy who started acting strangely. He had magical beliefs and passed himself off as a psychic. So I finally ghosted him after one bizarre exchange about a guy I briefly dated and who dumped me unceremoniously. Fast forward 2 weeks later, he starts an advice column on his Facebook page giving relationship advice to an unnamed woman, me, detailing her, mine, romantic problems on his social media and calling her, me, an idiot for being hung up on her ex and how I, should have better self-esteem. He told our friends how hurt he was that I blocked him on Facebook because we were so close, but didn't mention his advice column. Fast forward to 2 years later. He has his own relationship advice column in a local paper where he lovingly insults people over their romantic problems. Sounds like a jolly fellow. Story 9. I was 20. A friend of mine tried to set me up with a friend of hers. He's so nice. We talked online a couple of times. He seemed okay. Not exactly my type, but my friend assured me he was perfect for me, so I figured I'd give it a shot. It's worth noting that he wouldn't send me a picture. He talked on the phone once or twice, so I didn't think too much of it, and it was 2004, so maybe he was new to the internet and didn't have a photo. Agreed to meet at a public location, his work. I walked in and saw what had to be the most unattractive man I've ever seen. Not just regular everyday ugly, but Quasimodo ugly. He smelled bad and had awful teeth. I had somewhere to be, so I politely excused myself and went to meet another friend. This guy called me later that evening to talk about going out, and I gently, politely declined. Immediately, he told my friend I was a horrible witch and led him on. We took his side and it ended the friendship. I soon started dating someone I'd known for a while and had lots of things in common with. That relationship ran its course and my life moved on. 2 entire years later, I'm working at a hotel and my boss sends me on an errand to a big box store with a company credit card. I was an authorized user, and company membership card, which I was also authorized to use. My coworker and I got in line to check out, and who was the cashier? This guy. I recognized him. It was a small town, and I didn't think he recognized me. I'd lost weight, changed my hair, and was dressed very professionally. I went to pay for the order, and he pretended that the card was declined and then tried to confiscate it. He threatened to call his manager and started to insinuate that I'd stolen it. I was 22 and pretty easily intimidated, so I just left the store. A former friend, a woman, sent a message to me later. This guy said he saw you at his work. How does it feel to get rejected? It was so nice and you just throw away this great, nice guy. Is the friend being held at gunpoint by this dude? Story 10. I had met this guy at a friend's summer barbecue, and he was a lot of fun. We had mutual friends, and he seemed like a fun guy, so we exchanged contact info before I headed home, and added each other on Facebook the next day. At first, it was pretty normal. Since we shared a lot of common interests, we talked about that, and we'd message each other throughout the day. But then he got weird, like really rapidly. When I mentioned how awful my roommates were, he said he had a couch and I could always move in with him. This was after only a couple of weeks of knowing each other. Without even getting a response from me, either negative or positive, he started concocting some scenario where I'd walk around his place in my garments and leave them draped over the TV. It's like he had some kind of fantasy already planned out. That's just one example I remember, but he did it all the time. Eventually it got to be too much. He would take any topic and make it intimate, usually about me or the two of us, and talking to him became so frustrating that I started avoiding him. I didn't answer his texts or his messages on Facebook for about a week. One day he asked me what he had done, and I figured he deserved the truth, so I told him. As I had never given him any indication that I was interested, never once responded positively to his daydream scenarios, and I was really tired of him making everything about trying to talk me into intimacy. He apologized. I was actually really glad to get it out in the open, and I wanted to move on with our friendship. He made it about 24 whole hours before he did it again. He wasn't even subtle about it. Something about whatever I said made him want to be dirty. I said bye, blocked him on everything, and never spoke to him again. Story 11. Jason. I could write a book about this guy. The most egregious example of his arrogance was when a group of us were in a bar and one of my best friends, who Jason had never met before this night, had a little too much to drink and needed to go home. He kept insisting a bit too forcefully that he would make sure she got home safely. When I eventually told him to back off and that my friends and I could handle it, he haughtily announced that for my information he's made sure dozens of intoxicated girls have gone home safely and he didn't essay any of them. This schmuck was genuinely expecting praise for not being a criminal and believed that not being a criminal granted him on-demand access to my friend, who he didn't even know, was too drunk to string together a coherent sentence. When I still refused to back down, suddenly I was a typical girl who doesn't appreciate a nice gesture. Screw all the way off with that crap. Stop expecting rewards for meeting the barest minimum requirements for not being the scummiest person on earth. That's just one example of many from this gem of a person. Oh man, I would love to meet that guy. Story 12. After a coworker was extremely friendly and helpful, we got chatting outside of work. He quickly admitted he was still pure, quite late in life, and had no judgment, but he wanted me to sleep with him. I gave a firm no. I ran him one day, he called me a witch and said I was mean for no reason. After I had a go at him for saying something very hurtful, he sulked and told me he would delete the pictures of me that he had saved to fiddle to. I had no idea I had saved anything at all, and it was weird considering I sent him things like me holding my pets. I still have to see him around. Report him to HR, geez. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 13. Oh boy. Met this guy, Morgan, online from a mutual friend, and we hit it off. He was pretty cool, so I started texting him and so many red flags just kept coming out of nowhere. This guy had serious mental health issues, insane depression, and was very depressed. Now it's a cry for help to tell someone you just met all this, so I tried to be there for him until he started asking about a relationship. He thought dating someone would clear up all of his mental health struggles. When I tried to explain that I'm not interested in seeking a relationship with him, he verbally attacked me and said that I owe him because he was there for me when I needed help. Not to mention that 90% of our conversations were about his depression, family issues, insecurities. It was more of a therapist-patient relationship at that point. I ended up having to block him and everything because he would send me hateful messages and unsolicited pictures of his thing after I told him no. Sounds like he needs to be institutionalized. Story 14. I'm a gay woman, and I get an absurd amount of men that pretend to be my friend only to try to convert me months or years later. It's pretty heartbreaking, thinking I've got a supportive friend only to be given an ultimatum all of a sudden that I must date them or lose them. The fact that it happened several times with men all over the world, I move a lot, makes me wonder sometimes if something is just wrong with me. Story 15. My friend was about to go in for open heart surgery, so she, myself, and a few other friends met for dinner and drinks at a local neighborhood grill or pub. They have live music with a little dance floor on the weekends. A guy approached me and asked, "What is the first thing you look for in a guy?" I say, "I guess his overall presentation." He answers, "Do you know what I look for in a girl? Her smile, and you have a beautiful one." I thanked him, and he asked me to dance. Let me preface this next part by saying that before I switched to a silicone wedding ring, I would take my ring off for work. I coached gymnastics because it would scratch kids and such. I didn't throw it in my bag of things to change into before going out, so I say to him, "I know I don't have a wedding ring on because I just got off work, but I'm married. Thanks for asking, though." He proceeds to get a little hyper, saying, "I wasn't even hitting on you." I turn away and mind my friends. A couple hours later, we're leaving. The place is loud and crowded. As my friends and I are single file making our way through the crowd, I hear someone to my left angrily yelling. I look over just in time to see him lunge toward me. Two guys, I assume were his friends, beside him quickly grab him and pull him back. I hear one yell, "Dude, what the heck?" With my eyes probably the size of dinner plates, I pick up the pace for the exit. Story 16. A boy in my friendship group at uni just wouldn't get the hint. We'd all be hanging out and I would treat him the same as any other boys in our group. Got to the point he expressed interest in me and I gently put him down and explained I didn't see him that way. Now after this, we were close for a few weeks while I allowed him to get over it. But over the weeks that followed, we got back to where we'd always been and I continued to treat him the same as any of my other friends. Until he expressed feelings again. Now over the course of us being friends at uni, 2 years, the cycle repeated maybe 7 or 8 times, with me getting less and less gentle each time and the reconnected friendship becoming weaker and weaker with each expression of love. I graduated 4 years ago. The year immediately following I moved overseas, and the 3 after that, I think I've seen the boys of this group maybe 5 times in total. The last time was last summer. I'm still close with the girls still, and we thought it would be nice to see the boys as we hadn't in probably a year or so. That nice guy was in a relationship by this point. We weren't close at all by now because I felt it best then to constantly have to reject him. However, on this night out, he kept following me around, trying to touch me, and at one point said that he would dump his girlfriend for me as it's always been me he cared about. I'm trying to keep it light so I don't ruin the night and the reunion of old uni pals. My girlfriends are literally making a barrier around me to keep him away. The next morning, I vowed to never go somewhere I knew he'd be again. How many times does a girl have to say no? I'd also just like to say that for the majority of the time I've known him, we've really not even been that close as it was getting awkward the amount of times I'd have to tell him no. So there were definitely no actions of mine that could have been misinterpreted. Story 17. The worst ones I've dealt with never ask you out directly. No, they will hover around you and make it obvious what their intentions are, but since they never asked you out, they can make you out to be the witch when you finally tell them to back off. They think they're being slick, but when they are hovering around only you, and you happen to be the only young woman around, it's pretty freaking obvious. The most scary time was when I was walking home and a guy pulled up beside me asking if I needed a ride. No thanks, I said. Then he asked me if I wanted to get drinks. I said I got a man at home and I need to get going and sort of show him my engagement ring. I didn't accuse him of anything. It happens people don't see the ring and ask me out occasionally. No harm done. But I thought this would get him to back off. It did not. It made him angry to the point that he was screaming at me that he was a nice guy and that my fiancé must have a small Johnson if he didn't trust me to have male friends. I was just trying to be friendly. Just because I got a ring, that doesn't mean you have the right to be a witch, etc., etc. Sure, buddy. I'm sure you pull up to men all the time and randomly ask them to get drinks. I'm sure you had no intention besides being friends with me. Story 18. It's time for me to tell my story of Zachariah, the nicest nice guy. I went to an academic summer camp the summer between junior and senior year at a university I was interested in. There were about 100 people there, who were broken into groups based on what classes they took in high school and where you were from. In my group, there was a guy. Let's call him L. Well, I didn't realize at the time, but I caught L's eye and he tried to adopt me into his group of friends from a city, including Zachariah. Now, Zachariah was an R/I'm very smart personality type. I thought he was much funnier and better than most people, with an edgy taste in music and a refined taste in literature. This was all wrapped up in a lanky teen guy with a literal neckbeard. After being introduced into the group, Zachariah instantly took a liking to me, complimenting me on how much better than other girls I was. Everything I did was just so great because I knew or understood basic things and could comprehend sarcasm. After 3 days, he confessed his love to me and completely believed that we were soulmates and was shocked when I said I wasn't interested. I politely and naively told him we could stay friends if he thought he could handle it. He could not. Dude went off the deep end. Bad. Dude texted me obsessively, detailing everything he liked about me constantly. I'm talking several long texts every hour because every little thing reminded him of me. He got an idea in his head that I liked Al more than him. I did not, and nuked their 10-year friendship over this imaginary slight. I even remember him describing a dream about me in a housewife role. Way too detailed and uncomfortable. Down to features I don't even have. I slowly pulled away but was anxious because we were both going into the same university the next summer through the same program, and I knew I wouldn't be able to avoid him entirely. He did back off for a bit, but only because he found him much younger, 5 years different, so he was going to college and she would be a freshman the following year. Girl who was the same type as me. It only got worse at the university where it came to a head when he decided to tell me off because my current boyfriend was breaking my spirit, and it turned into a cold, heartless witch. I transferred universities, and now I don't hear from him anymore. Story 19. Oh man. There was this guy who hit on any girl he laid eyes on. It was terrible, and he was creepy. I didn't care if they had an SO. He was super insistent when hitting on them as well. He targeted me a few times, saying we should hang out or that he bought tickets to a movie that I had mentioned. I told him I wouldn't hang out with him outside of work and that he knew I had a boyfriend, and then he asked me what my twin sister was doing that weekend. Well, she's not hanging out with you, that's for sure. This dude would lament about being a nice guy and say that no one gave him a chance, etc. He went as far as to ask one of my married coworkers if they wanted to chill and was all like, "Oh, I don't care that you're married." Story 20. I went on a date after meeting on a dating app. I wasn't feeling it, so I let him know. He kicked up a fuss for a while about how he felt chemistry, and obviously I just needed to go on a few more dates. I really wasn't interested at all and eventually stopped sending messages. A few months later, I changed my hairstyle to a dyed black bob with bangs, took a snap of myself, making a goofy face with it with some caption like, "I can be Spock now," then uploaded it to my dating app profile because I like to poke fun at myself. He messaged me the next day or so and it went something like this: "How could you be Spock? You wouldn't show emotion like that," etc. I just blocked him and called it a day. He did this several months after I'd stopped responding to him the first time around. Story 21. He played the part of a good and supportive friend through my divorce, never hinting that he was interested in me beyond a casual online friend that I sometimes chatted to on the phone. When I began dating the man I've now been married to for over a decade, I was suddenly a witch. I hung up on him the moment the word came out of his mouth, but he called daily for the next few months, leaving very casual messages as though nothing had happened. Finally, I got fed up with ignoring the calls. I didn't block them because I was saving his messages in case he got in his head to come to my state and stalk me, which was a distinct possibility because we were neighboring states and 2.5 hours away from each other. I answered the phone 2 days before my wedding and told him off for being a typical nauseating nice guy. He actually told me that marrying some guy and leaving the country was stupid, and that I would get hurt because only he knew what I needed. I hung up on him again, but not before I told him how sick and creepy he was. Years later, he still occasionally messages me through Facebook, which I rarely even check, trying to strike up conversations about how amazing it is that we've been friends for so long. Gag. Seriously? Pretty one-sided friendship, considering he called me a witch for not wanting to be with him and has since ignored any explanations as to why I don't speak to him. He's never even bothered to apologize, and if I respond to him at all, it's usually a one-word whatever. The last time he messaged me, I thought about blocking him, but I still just save everything he says or sends because even though I am 5,000 miles away, I get the feeling that I will need it as evidence one day. If not for me, for someone else that he may do this to. Story 22. Not a woman of Reddit, but this reminds me of a conversation I overheard between two coworkers. One was a professed nice guy, the other a female coworker. The nice guy had tried to move on another coworker and she turned him down. He came to our cube farm, grumbling all the typical nice guy BS we'd heard 1,000 times before. My female coworker lets him taper off and turns to him and says, "Gary, you're not a nice guy. You're a creepy wuss. If you were nice, she would have gone out with you." No one in our department was ever subjected to any of his nice guy rants after that. It must have been what he needed to hear because I heard that he found someone and was dating after I left the job. All Gary needed was a slap of the truth. Story 23. Don't know if it exactly fits in here, but I had an experience with an ex. At first, he was a very nice and shy guy. Almost too shy, but I was pretty shy too. We had a long-distance relationship for about 8 months. Near the end of our relationship, he was becoming pretty aggressive because he accused me of cheating on him. Swear to God I didn't, but he didn't like that answer. We got into a fight and he called me all the names in the books, so that's when I chose to end it because it was becoming emotionally cruel. I stopped answering his texts and he kept calling and calling until the next day I finally answered him. He just screamed through the phone and called me a witch. I yelled back at him and told him it was over. Blocked my number and cried my eyes out. Every now and then he would message me on Facebook wanting to ask questions. I would give him the time of day and then block him again. I'm just glad I opted out of that one. Story 24. I used to work at a car dealership as a service advisor. I'd meet people at their vehicles, check them, and get the services they needed for the day documented in the paperwork. So one day, this man came in. He was tall, about 6'2", approximately 188 cm, and somewhat large in build. I'm only about 5 feet, approximately 152 cm, and quite small compared to him. He pointed this out by saying he thought I was a kid working there. I chuckled a bit and said, "I'm over short jokes." He laughed and I continued the check-in process. From there, he started talking about how he dressed as Santa Claus for the holidays. Told him that was nice and that it must take patience to be around that many kids. But then started going on about how he's such a good person and how he just loves doing good things and helping others. He then proceeded to tell me that he wanted to dress as Santa for me and have me sit in his lap. I looked at him, looked at my check-in tablet, handed it to him to sign and walked away in complete shocked silence. I told my manager at the time that I wouldn't be dealing with that customer from then on and explained everything he had said. Thankfully, there were other people to take over his paperwork. Story 25. I had a stalker. He went to one of the high schools I went to. He was my friend and had only been to my house once, 4 years before. It was weird that he was able to remember where he was because my neighborhood has a lot of streets that look the same. He would just show up at my house with flowers and tell me that my boyfriend wasn't right for me. Once I heard my dad yelling outside and this guy was sitting in his car outside my house. My dad said, "You're a stalker, man." And the guy so innocently went, "Why would you think that?" It didn't stop until the police got involved. It was really creepy. Why would you think that? That's a crazy assumption. Story 26. I dated a nice guy for a day. We went on one date and he began to brag about all the other girls he used to date and how many he dated. Then he said he made room in the back of the car to have intimacy in. Then I laughed and said, "You're joking, right?" His stories about his other girls was that he would date them for a bit, have intimacy, and then break up to find another girl to date. Rinse and repeat. Not a nice guy, and he ghosted me after I rejected him. Saw him 5 years later with some 2 girls linked in his arms. Still up to no good. Lol. Glad to never cross paths with him again. Story 27. There was a guy from OkCupid that I'd gone out with and told pretty early on that I just wanted to be friends. Nothing against the guy, just wasn't into him like that, so no hard feelings, right? Nope. After cornering me at the bowling alley and pretty much making me kiss him, I told him again that I wasn't interested in being with him romantically. That's when the nice guy meltdown happened. I started getting texts about how I should give him a chance because he's nice, and being nice didn't get him anything. I said that I should at least make out with him because I owe him that he had put a bunch of miles on his car for me, that I never asked him to do, that I'd caused him to stay up all night with anxiety and disappointed his grandparents by not being with him. When I finally told that I didn't even want to be friends with him anymore, he broke down and begged me not to go, but seemed to understand, or so I thought. A week later, he started texting me again and created a Facebook account just to friend me. I blocked and ignored everything and haven't heard anything more from him. Story 28. It was a friend of mine from high school. We reconnected in the Book of Faces and had a good time catching up. I was engaged at the time, which was shown on FB, and I was talking about my fiancé and wedding plans, so it wasn't a big secret I was with someone. I then asked if I would come visit him for a weekend. Not my fiancé and me, just me. I obviously declined because I was getting married. I woke up the next morning to pages and pages of messages, all in FB Messenger, ranging from, "You're leading me on," to, "You're my soulmate, I just know it," to, "Why don't you go pass away?" Insert insult of choice here. There were several of them. It was like he'd get really mad and go off, then calm down and realize he still wanted to be with me, so he'd go back to smooth talking. Basically all night. Freaked me out, so I showed my fiancé the messages, including the messages before that, so it was clear I was open that I was engaged, not leading anyone on. Then blocked my former friend. It was really unnerving how quickly things went from a friendly catch-up chat to unhinged ranting. Story 29. I was an intern at a community mental health center when I was working on my master's in psychology. I became friends with one of the male therapists. He made a pass on me on a particularly rough day that also happened to be my birthday. I told him I only wanted to be friends, and he kept pushing me, claiming he was a nice guy and insisting on knowing my justification for turning him down. Later that week, he tried to tell my supervisor I was a bad therapist. Luckily, she didn't believe him since she had been supervising me for 8 months by then and knew me pretty well. It was a super crappy move. As a student, it would have really hurt me if I'd been kicked out of my internship. I was interviewing at a different site 2 years later and saw his name in a cubicle, so I immediately turned down their offer. Kind of lame that I had to pass up on an opportunity because of such a nice guy, but I know I never would have felt comfortable there. Story 30. This was a long story that took place over about a year. The abbreviated version is that this dude, R, from online, somehow figured out where I worked and sent flowers there. When I told him that it was creepy and not romantic, he exploded. He later apologized and we tried to be friends again. When I shared personal information I had told him on the forum we knew each other from, and I called him out on it, he exploded again and told my boyfriend, now husband, that I was in love with him, R, and leading him BF on, also that I was mentally unstable, a liar, etc. I stupidly gave him one more chance after this. He took the opportunity to go on blast in the forum and share all kinds of info. He made himself look like the victim and like I was a crazy witch, out to ruin his reputation. I also found corn he had written that starred me, using my forum name, and him in explicit situations. When our friendship deteriorated, it began to be less romantic and consensual and more weird and cruel. I stumbled onto his live journal around 2 years after I blocked him everywhere. He was going through the same crap with someone else. This was just how he operated. This was in the early 2000s before the term nice guy existed. Like I said, this is the short version. It was drawn out over a year or so. I found old chat logs a few years ago that I'd saved as evidence in case he ever did anything. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.